This episode of the Durian Pod is brought to you by Hexclad, official cookware partner of TDP.
On this episode of the Durian Pod,
here I was throwing that away, like a very coveted, high paying, whatever job. And they're like, wait, you're telling us you're washing dishes at a restaurant? And I'm like, well, it's my restaurant. Yeah. They like to place it into a box. Like Chinese food also, by the way, is allowed to evolve, and it has to evolve. Absolutely. Like all cuisines, if they don't evolve, they die. It was kind of a light bulb that was like, you can reclaim your identity. And to me, the first step towards that was reclaiming my birth name.
Cheers. Cheers. Our friends at Suntory here, they provided us this beverage called Suntory All Free.
Yes, Suntory All Free, yeah.
Tell them what that is.
Yeah, we actually stocked this at the Supper Club, and it's a really tasty, non-alcoholic, zero-calorie beverage. Bubbly, spritzy, delicious. We actually have it in the mocktail for our guests today as well. And we're celebrating Sober October, so let's get this podcast started.
What's up, everyone? My name is David.
And I'm Jasper.
And behind the camera, we have our wonderful Heidi.
Hey, hey.
And this is another episode of the Durian Pod. This is a show where we showcase our friends who have fought against societal standards, but still made it to the top. She is the founder and CEO of Fly by Jing. If you don't know Fly by Jing, they are responsible for the premium and all-natural Sichuan chili crisp.
Oh, you said it right. Nice.
The hype is so real, she's already collaborated with the likes of Panda Express, Shake Shack, and Hot Ones. You can find them in over 5,000 stores, including titans like Costco and Amazon. She's also a self-made chef, founded her own restaurant in Shanghai, and eventually her own underground supper club. Does that sound familiar?
Yeah, it does. Love supper clubs.
She recently released her own cookbook. That happened last week, so congratulations on that. And then she's also about to open up on the horizon her concept unique marketplace in Los Angeles called Swa, showcasing Chinese food and heritage. So
super stoked.
Let us put our hands together for our guest today, Jing Gao.
Jing, my friend, what's up?
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. I know it's a Tuesday. You came during rush hour. Super appreciate it.
I came hungry, so.
Oh, don't worry.
I'm ready.
We're here to feed you. We're here.
Speaking of underground supper clubs, Jasper has kind of curated a menu today to get this party going.
Yeah.
Awesome.
If you're ready to eat, it sounds like you're ready to eat. I'll get that first course started and I'll be right back. So
great.
Awesome.
Thank you.
So to welcome you to the show, what we do is the Amuse bouche, right? It's the Amuse. It's the first course that we always serve at Roslyn, and it's usually something that we do during cocktail hour. But of course, you're coming here for a 3-course tasting menu. We pump it up so it's a little bit bigger. We're serving it tonight with some charred Bali squid. It's fresh, flown in overnight. We have it actually deveined and all that other good stuff. It's charred on the pan, super hot, which is why the whole place became a Korean barbecue joint earlier, And then to bring it all together, because I really wanted to play with those themes of kind of charring and what you would see in the streets of like Thailand or Southeast Asia. The Dragonfruit, which is in season as well, is also fire charred. To bring it all together, we were talking about a little acidity. We've got basil that is tossed in a passion fruit namjim sauce. So very bright, vibrant. We get fresh passion fruit, fish sauce, Thai chilies, a little bit of garlic to bring it together. But this is gonna be your first bite, and I hope you enjoy it.
Can't wait.
Awesome. Now let's dig in.
This is like the first multiple bites.
I wanted something a little more substantial today, and I think this is the right way to do it.
I've never had dragon fruit in like a savory appetizer before.
Same.
This is very good.
So we like to always prepare something special, and I know that we're celebrating Sober October, and also you're not drinking right now, probably because you're doing a tour of something really amazing, and we'll talk about that later. But we have a matcha latte that actually has a little bit of honey, and we added it in with Suntory All Free, so it's got extra nuttiness and that crisp flavor, and it makes it refreshing on a really warm October day. So hopefully you enjoy it.
Yeah, like you said, the all free works so well with the matcha. Kind of tastes like a breakfast beverage of sorts, but still very refreshing. Yeah, so thank you.
Oh, my pleasure.
Yeah.
Let's rewind and let's talk about your upbringing, Jing. Let's talk about Mini Jing.
Mini Jing.
Yeah, Mini Jing. Let's start from the beginning. Not the hospital, but maybe a little fast forward. Okay. and then from there.
All right.
Tell us how your parents, how you grew up, where.
So I was born in Chengdu, the capital of Sichuan province, also known as the food capital of China. It is, just an incredible like food lover's paradise, right? I was born into that, but grew up kind of all over the world. My parents' job took us to Germany and then England, Austria, France, Italy, and then Canada. So we were pretty much on the move every year of my life until almost high school. So as a kid, I think I learned very early on to sort of assimilate and adapt to my environment, try to code switch, try to fit in. I was in, countries where the language, the culture would differ drastically year to year. So kind of the best way I knew how to cope was by trying to blend in. So at a very young age, I think it was 5 or 6, I decided that I was no longer going to go by my Chinese name. I was going to go with a Western name that was easier for the kids to pronounce. I wouldn't stick out as much because I was already the only Asian kid everywhere I went. So I don't know where I came up with this, probably from TV, but I just decided to call myself Jenny. So from that day on, I was Jenny. And
Forrest Gump.
maybe. But, I remained Jenny for the next almost 30 years of my life. So, fast forward, I ended up in Canada. I went to business school there. And in between this time, like every maybe 3 to 4 years, we would go back and visit my family in Sichuan. And I'm an only child, so it was just my parents and I. And so we would go and visit my grandparents and cousins and stuff. And I just remember my earliest food memory was eating with my family in these street side stalls, like these restaurants that are known as fly restaurants in Chengdu. So fly restaurants, so literally in Chinese, it's 苍蝇馆. It is what you refer to as hole in the walls that are so delicious they attract people like flies. So it's such a unique and dynamic aspect of Sichuan, is specifically Chengdu's dining scene. I think it's a beautiful kind of socioeconomic equalizer because you have people from all different backgrounds just sharing a table, rickety stools on the sidewalk. Everyone's just there in pursuit of flavor, and that's it. There's no judgment or pretense. So I really loved that experience, and that was my earliest memory of delicious dumplings, noodles, slathered in chili oil and, just lighting up your taste buds. So later on, but, growing up in the West, and my mom would cook for us at home, but she would have to adapt a lot. There was never the ingredients that she was used to. So the cooking, or her version of Chinese food, was, ended up somewhere neither here nor there. I couldn't classify it if I tried. And we kind of got more and more out of touch with our home, and my language ability wasn't as good anymore, so I couldn't communicate with my cousins the same way I used to, and so I became more and more kind of withdrawn from that.
Why did you move around so much? Just curious.
So my dad was a nuclear physicist.
Oh.
He actually worked on the atomic bomb in China at one point, but in order for us to kind of move to the West and for me to go to school in the West, he actually gave that up and became a professor. So we moved with him to different university towns and stuff, where he would also, in Europe, we couldn't stay anywhere for more than a year because of visa issues. So until we immigrated to Canada, that's where he actually changed fields entirely. But so after I graduated, I took a job in a tech company, which actually brought me to Asia. I, at the time, was I'm pretty Western. I didn't realize really that I was always kind of seeking that sense of belonging and not really finding it. But I thought I knew who I was. And then I ended up in China. I was in Beijing and then Shanghai. And I actually ended up spending about 10 years there. But when I first moved there, that's when I sort of realized I had kind of an identity crisis. I was like, wait a minute, I'm not Chinese. I don't feel Canadian. What is going on? Who am I? And I think I was able to use food as the way to really dig deep and try to peel back some of the layers. It just started out as really enjoying the food, and I would eat out all the time, explore the different regional restaurants in Beijing and Shanghai, learning that Chinese food is so vast and complex, and
there's so much there.
There's so much depth. It's more of a continent than a country. I had very little understanding of it. And so I was just curious, started exploring. That turned into a hobby of writing about it, trying to expose more people to what I was learning. And, one thing kind of led to another, and I ended up, in a career in food. But I think it was really it started out with a very selfish pursuit of like, figuring out my identity. But then the more I got into it, the more I realized, there was a broader mission that I had of trying to shift the narrative about Chinese food globally, because I knew that there were perceptions about Chinese food that weren't necessarily true. So being there and being like, right there with the ingredients, with the history, with the flavors, I knew that I had this like access that I could, hopefully give to other people.
You might have not said why you went to China for 10 years, but for whatever reason you did, like, were your parents like okay with this? Because, you left the family. And
initially I went with a tech job. So it was like a pretty solid corporate 9-to-5 type thing, which they were like,
that was the safe part.
Yeah, exactly.
They were proud for a second.
Yeah, they were proud. They were proud.
They were. So when I quit though, and I said, hey, mom and dad, I'm actually opening a restaurant in Shanghai, that was like not cool. They were like, wait a minute, you're telling us that so my grandmother actually would say, she said, you're throwing away your golden rice bowl. Like golden rice bowl is what they refer to, like a steady job. Because like all my parents wanted to do, they gave up so much to immigrate to, Canada, and all they wanted ever for me was a steady, like, security, right? Steady job. And then here I was throwing that away, like a very coveted, high paying, whatever job, and diving into the unknown. And they're like, wait, you're telling us you're washing dishes at a restaurant? And I'm like, well, it's my restaurant. And they're like, but still. And so it was like, it took some time. I would say they were definitely, they didn't disown me or anything. They're like supportive, but at the end of the day, they had to support me, but they were definitely very fearful. And I think, I had to work through a lot of like fear that I felt that my parents had ingrained in me, like the immigrant mentality of like, failure's always around the corner.
Yeah.
You can never be too sure, like all these things, which I had to overcome in order to like gain the confidence to even start my own thing.
That's crazy.
Like, that is rare, yeah. I mean, it sounds like all the stuff that I'm going through right now.
Right.
with my folks, they're still finally kind of like, you're kind of making it, I guess.
Yeah.
But you draw, like I also was in tech.
Yeah.
And then I left that to do this. And you can imagine my mother's face, probably the same as your parents, going like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
How did you break that? Probably a terrible word, but how did you break that brainwash? Like because a lot of people stay in line, or how were you dealing with that? And like, how did you find the courage, I guess?
I think it took me some time, right? Like I started, when I graduated, well, first of all, even going to business school was like kind of a compromise with my parents. My dad's a scientist and they wanted me to be a doctor or whatever. I actually wanted to be an artist. I was like intent on going to art school, and they were like, no way in hell you're going to art school. So somehow business school was like a weird compromise. I think because a family friend's daughter was going to business school. So I thought she was really cool. So I was like, okay, I'll do that too. I had no idea what business school was. After I graduated, I was too scared to kind of do anything, venture out on my own. I took, several corporate jobs, and it took me probably about 5 years before I felt like I had gathered enough kind of, experience under my belt that I could venture out and do something. And the way that I kind of picked my corporate experiences too were, I was trying to get as broad of like an experience base as I could. So I actually started out at P&G in brand management. And I think that's actually a really great training ground if you want to be an entrepreneur, because as a brand manager, you're kind of in charge of a brand. You're like, you have to work with all these cross-functional teams in order for them to, do what you want them to do. Because all these cross functions, they actually work on many different brands, right? So it's an exercise in entrepreneurship. And then, after a couple of years, I went to BlackBerry, where I did more kind of product management and BD and strategic BD. And that allowed me to learn a new set of skills. And the same with the next tech company I went to.
Do you guys know what BlackBerry is?
Yeah, it's the fruit.
Are you sure? I know what it is.
You know what it is?
Yes.
Okay, good. Yeah. So I think, there was kind of a gradual step there. I was looking back in like a scrapbook that I made when I was 8 years old. And I was shocked to see this page that said, what do I want to be when I grow up? I wrote a CEO. And I'm sure I had no idea what CEO meant at the time.
Really?
But like, for some reason, I just was, even at that age, was like, oh, I'm going to do my own thing. And I remember, you know, when I was working in the corporate world, every couple of years, I would kind of get restless and be like, all right, I feel like I've learned a lot from this. And now I feel like it's the scale is starting to tip, like they're getting more out of me than I'm getting out of this company. Where I was always thinking in that way, like, how do I extract as much like experience from this, job? And then I would switch to the next thing. So I think the whole time I was thinking like, what skills, how do I learn on someone else's dime so that I can do my own thing?
Right.
And so I think I think I just can't work for anybody. And I think that's not everybody. You know, some people are like that, right? Like you're nodding. Yeah. I think like when you know, like you're just not cut out to obey and follow instructions. You want to create. And I think artists, designers, chefs, whatever, like you're just there to create something. And I think that's what propelled me and got me past all the hurdles, even though, you know, like the brainwashing, like you said.
For sure.
Yeah.
You think that's like one of those, like, it's like that itch or like that spoken voice in the back? Because I definitely had that through my career. I'm hearing you talk about this where it's like you kind of reach a cap at a firm, kind of like, okay, I don't really want to be here anymore. I don't know why, but I feel like there's just no more gain here. And it's time for me to jump ship. And it does. Sometimes I've made leaps of faith where I didn't even have anything lined up. I was just like, this is useless. Yeah. Right. Okay. That's incredible.
Absolutely.
And would you say that kind of started though as the 8-year-old who was like writing CEO in the scrapbook? Or like, do you feel like there was a little more like influence from say how your parents were because, you know, your dad was a nuclear scientist, right? Do you think that had some sort of impact?
I think I always knew that corporate life and climbing a corporate ladder wasn't for me just because like of my initial experience there. I didn't actually know what a path of entrepreneurship could look like, right? But I think when I was in China, it was actually a really exciting time to be in China. It just kind of felt like anything's possible. There was a lot happening. There was a lot of energy. And, you know, I met the most interesting people. And I think through that experience, I just was really trying to do as much as I could and see what interested me, you know, and food happened to stick.
Yeah. And was this more towards the economic boom, like in like the kind of mid 2000s type of era? Or
this was like 2008, like right after the Olympics. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. So it was like there was electricity in the air in Beijing and like everybody was in Beijing from all over China, but also all over the world. And you just met the most interesting people, best conversations. I worked for a little bit for a microfinance nonprofit there. So it was just like, you kind of felt like it was like the Wild West, like anything goes. Yeah.
You've done everything. That's so cool.
like literally everything. Yeah. I think that's the longest intro we've had.
that was fantastic.
Yeah. If you can speak on more detail about how you got into chefing, you know, you fell in love with food, but how, and then where did that take you?
Yeah. So I just really started like studying Chinese cuisine. I was really fascinated with like the different regions. In Beijing, I used to do food tours. So I would take people around and I would learn kind of like as I would go and I would share what I was learning. And, you know, there's like Beijing is like the capital. So you've got all these regional government offices and all of those government offices have restaurants because the government officials from those provinces want authentic food from their hometown. Right. So they send out chefs. And then those are open to the public. So they've become like the most authentic version of those regions' cuisines. So like that was my first taste of like Xinjiang food and like Yunnan food and like, you know, like Manchurian food, Hakka food, you know, it's like so amazing. And so I just was writing about it. I would kind of like try to figure out how to cook on my own. I eventually like did more kind of media stuff. Like when Andrew Zimmern or Eddie Huang would come to China, I would take them around, be on their shows and stuff. And eventually I think I just it was really probably a bit of hubris, but I was like, I think I want to open a restaurant. So I had met some partners who had the funding and I had this idea. I wanted to create like a modern Chinese fast casual restaurant, kind of like the model of Chipotle. Okay. So where you can choose your mains, your proteins, your sides and whatnot. And that was really just like, okay, I think I have a good palate. Let's just figure out what the menu could look like. And since it's fast casual, it's pretty casual. So like it doesn't have to have super high technical, ability. So that was kind of the first thing. Now, after a couple of years of running that, which was very successful, I realized like I want to dig deeper. Like I want to, and also like we were doing regional Chinese, so that's like a broad like number of cuisines. And I realized like I kind of would rather know much more about one thing than a little bit about everything. So I wanted to just go back to my roots. So went to Chengdu. I sought out a chef there who is an incredible chef. And, I was like, can I just come and hang out with you and just like work in your kitchen? So I was able to spend like several months with him and his wife and learn so much about, techniques, the flavor profiles of Sichuan, which is what Sichuan food is famous for, and also the ingredients. So that was like really eye-opening to see like one ingredient is not the same as another. There's, a dozen different grades of just black beans and, rapeseed oil and, chilies. And it makes a world of difference when you kind of really seek out like the highest quality, right? And the access was also really difficult. Like these are ingredients that only like Michelin level chefs have access to.
Even when you're in the region?
Yeah. Because there's like good quality. There's like stuff that's available out in the market.
Okay.
And then there's stuff that is not available. You have to really know,
Yeah.
So through him, I was able to like access, the best quality doubanjiang, fermented fava bean paste, which is the soul of Sichuan cuisine. The most incredible oils, the most incredible Sichuan pepper, which is from this region, 4-hour drive from Chengdu, where it's so electrifying, and it's really transformative when you use it. So, through that experience, I was like, okay, let me take this foundation of knowledge, but like try to express something that's unique to me. And so that's where Fly by Jing as like the supper club kind of came about. But definitely had a lot of fear doing that. I'd only trained for a little bit. I was mostly self-taught. I definitely would not ever compare myself to a trained chef by any means. But for me, I was just like, it was more about self-expression, trying to figure out who am I and what am I trying to say through these ingredients and these flavors. And so I was able to be a bit more playful with it as well.
I was immediately thinking, are you talking about those Urjingtao chilies? Am I saying it right?
Yeah, the tribute peppers,
tribute
actually.
peppers?
Yeah.
I
So
think we
they're
had 'em, yeah.
Sichuan pepper that's so high quality. They used to be only for the emperor. So it's from this one region. And it's really like no other Sichuan pepper you've ever, experienced. It's so potent. Yeah.
And I think it's really interesting you bring up the point, because I think especially in American palates, and what I've realized now cooking 3 years now, is a lot of them don't see the difference between, say, for example, chili flakes. And it's just a chili flake is chili flake. Black peppercorn is black peppercorn. And it's fascinating because when we finally started diving deeper, it was like, wait a second, no, there's like 5 or 6 different tiers minimum of black pepper. And even then there are different types of black pepper that you can get that have different aromatics.
And then it's like about, the knowledge and the demand and the supply, because the majority of people aren't aware. And so what you find in grocery store shelves are like kind of like very low tier stuff. And then you talk about storage. And like, spices have a very short period of life. So the Sichuan pepper that we source, we tell people to keep it in the freezer because that's how you can maintain the oil content of the Sichuan pepper. It has such a short period of potency. And if you've had like other, single origin spice companies like Diaspora, you taste their turmeric. It is worlds apart from turmeric that you get in the grocery store,
With the quotes too, especially.
Yeah.
I think the best comparison I've been able to explain to people is like butter, because I think everyone's had butter. Right? You go to your grocery store, you go to your Ralph's or whatever, you get your butter. It's good, right? And then you have like the branded ones like Land O'Lakes. And it's like, oh, that's a little bit better. But then you start going into like Beurre Blanc, and then you have like the fancier ones from Belgium. And then it's like, holy cow. That wasn't supposed to be applied.
Literally.
But like, it's a world difference. I think those are like kind of the distinguishments of how I'm able to describe to people how big of a difference ingredients can make.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's so cool. Yeah.
For someone that the commoner, that someone doesn't have that knowledge, you're like, oh man, I got this from Ralph's. This is the best. Try it.
Mr. McCormick Spice here.
I have chefs on both my sides just telling me like, hey, this is not the truth. But favorite fly restaurant? I'm curious. This might break social media.
There is a restaurant in Chengdu that I go to every single time. Well, there's so many. It's literally like impossible to pick a favorite. But one that I would say is very iconic it's a cross from a temple.
Okay.
It's been there for like 100 years. My mom and my grandmother used to go.
Wow.
And they specialize in street snacks. So things like, and they specialize in like mung bean type noodles, green bean type noodles, like starch kind of noodles, and also Sweetwater noodles. So Sweetwater noodles, if you aren't familiar, is a Chengdu specialty. And these are really thick, almost like kind of like the width of like 1 or 2 chopsticks. Okay. Really thick al dente noodle, which is pretty rare in Chinese. Chinese noodles usually are not al dente, but this is like chewy al dente. And sometimes it's usually like, one bowl might just be one long strand.
Are these the ones that are like partially clear looking? Like, but they're whitish in a lot of chili oil?
They're not clear because it's wheat.
Right,
so
right.
it's not a starch. It's not one of those mung bean starches, although they also have those. But this Sweetwater noodle, it's characterized by the noodle texture itself, but also by the sauce. So the sauce is iconic. It's like this garlicky chili oil with a sweet soy, like a reduced sweet soy, and like a little bit of roasted sesame paste. So you're getting like a really nice like coating of sauce on the strand of noodle. It's amazing. So actually, the Zhong sauce that I developed is inspired by that. Well, it's inspired by the Zhong dumplings, which they also have. And so Zhong dumpling and Sweetwater noodle is very similar, the sauce. The only difference is really the sesame paste. So I have a recipe for Sweetwater noodle in my cookbook, which, as a shortcut, you could just use Zhong with a little bit of sesame paste and you can get there. So
okay.
Wow. But okay, that's a great hack. But how do I get this noodle though?
You could,
now I wanna
it's
know.
very easy to make actually. So I also have a recipe for that in the cookbook. And it's just flour, water, salt. You let it rest a little bit and then, you kind of cut it. You roll it out into like a rectangle and you just cut it like into the width of like a chopstick. And then you take each one after it rests and pull it out a little bit. And that's it.
You're not going to do the whole dance as well?
That's a different noodle.
I just thought it'd be kind of funny.
Fast forward to 2018, you launched Fly by Jing, right? 6 months later, when you launch it on Amazon specifically, you become the most, I think, search or #1 chili on the
hot sauce
on the platform. Yeah. What are your 2 most proudest moments for the brand, for developing that on the creative side? Like, oh, this is it, something like that. But also on the business side where you're like, I killed that as far as like negotiations and whatnot.
I think in terms of like the creative side, one big moment for us was when we did our rebrand. And that was, initially when we first launched, the jar looked very different. It was my goal with the jar at first was really just to like, stop people in their tracks and have them, wonder why they expected Chinese food to look differently, right? Because
is that you?
This current one? Or?
Yeah. So I remember seeing the old one. The old one was like bright neon. Yeah. And it was like, hey, look at me now. And then this one is more dumbed down, but it still like has that like eye-catching characteristic about it.
You could definitely see it on every shelf. Like,
yeah.
You're like, oh, cool.
So I think the reason behind that was, like I never set out to be like, I'm gonna start this sauce company and like it's gonna create a category, this and that. I was really just trying to change people's perceptions about Chinese food, right? So with my Kickstarter, I was like, okay, we're changing a paradigm. We believe that Chinese food can be the most high quality, no preservatives, no whatever, and that it deserves a premium value, So with the in the neon, that was the only purpose I had, was just to like stop them in their tracks and, you know, have them question their internal biases. Like, why did I expect Chinese food to look differently, right? But after we launched, you know, we had a ton of supporters, but we also had more, maybe even detractors and people who were like challenging us, like, you know, this is not my experience of what Chinese food tastes like, so therefore it must not be Chinese food, right? Or how dare you charge $15 for this when Chinese food is not supposed to be expensive, it's supposed to be cheap. So a lot of people, I realized, had these preconceived notions about what Asian food or Chinese food or, you know, pretty much ethnic food should be. They like to place it into a box, not let it evolve, not let it change past their own experience of it, right? But it's something that's very, like, interestingly, only reserved for ethnic cuisines, right? Like Chinese food also, by the way, is allowed to evolve, and it has to evolve. Absolutely. Like all cuisines, if they don't evolve, they die. I lived in China, and I knew that, you know, I was watching kind of what was happening in Chengdu and all the new school sort of fly restaurants popping up, run by next generation of chefs and, you know, and food lovers. And I was like, people are doing really interesting things here. However, in the West, there seems to be this preoccupation with trying to keep Chinese food in a box and not let it evolve, right? So I was like, that's not actually real. Like in China, food is like evolving.
Right.
And also what is more interesting is when someone is expressing something very unique to themselves. And as a chef, you know, no one questions why a chef's version of something is that. Like it is expected, especially in fine dining, that this is their personal expression, right?
Yeah.
And, you know, whereas like when it comes to Chinese chili sauce, everyone has an opinion. So that was kind of the point where I was like, I think we need a rebrand, not only to tell our story more fully, because at the time, something I would get a lot is if I sat down and had a conversation like this and I told people my story, why I was doing what I was doing, the response was always, oh my God, I had no idea. That's so cool. Like, I had no idea. I just thought it was a cool looking jar. And I realized, you know, right now we're building this brand online. We have the luxury to be able to create, you know, that brand world and tell that story. However, one day we're going to be sold in stores and someone might be seeing us on shelf for the first time. That might be the first point of contact. So how do you like get them to know the story without me sitting down with you, right? So that was where the idea for a rebrand came about. And with the rebrand, I worked with an agency here in LA called Day Job. And they're really talented. And I spent weeks with them, just like literally telling them the story, sharing like, you know, all of these resistances I was coming up against, all these questions and challenges I was always answering to. And we came to this tagline together, which is not traditional, but personal. And I think, you know, once we landed on that, it just clicked. And anyone that I told that to, it just like there was a recognition and they kind of knew exactly what that meant. And then the other thing is, you know, I shared a story with them about how when the first time I showed my family in Sichuan this sauce, and this sauce that's made with only Sichuan ingredients, you know, made in Sichuan, their reaction was, oh, well, this is interesting, but this tastes different. Like we're not used to this. And so we have this Venn diagram on the jar that says Sichuan people and everyone else, and the common ground is this tastes different. And that's, again, to drive home the point that this is a personal expression. Like no one else is going to, you know, take those same 18 ingredients and put it together in the same way that I did, right?
Yeah, right.
And so what we wanted to show that the personal expression deserves to have a place. And not just my expression, everyone else's expression too. There's so many forms of Chinese food, Chinese sauces, even just chili crisp. Like there's thousands of different styles. And so by taking up that space and being like, okay, we deserve to have this space where really, you know, what I didn't realize at the time, but what ended up happening was we really opened the doors for more people to come in and also, you know, stake a claim for themselves as well.
Definitely made a huge impact in terms of just paving the palette for this stuff, which is incredible. You know, even when we started, I think there was still a lot of resistance. This was 2020 when I first started cooking. There was resistance from even some of my friends going like, "Hey, wait a second, like that's not Cantonese." So I'm a Canto boy. So they were like, "That's not Cantonese food." I'm like, "I know it's not. If it's just some of the flavors and elements that I like, and it's inspired by that, right?"
Yeah.
And I think it takes time, and it takes someone with your tenacity to go, "This is my expression," to really push for it. Because I think even as a chef now, I get resistance. Like we just did a Filipino French series. A lot of Filipinos came in saying, this is not Filipino food. I would never pay this much for Filipino food. And then when they try it, they see that the expression really honors the original kind of core idea, but it's not traditional.
Yeah.
Right. And I think it's incredible that you've done that, because now pretty much all my friends go, I've had Fly by Jing. I love chili oil now, because a lot of my friends did not like it back in the day. And no, just I think that's my way of saying thank you for paving that path for people like us to be able to do that.
Oh, well, thank you for continuing to do this work, right? Like, I think what's been beautiful about this journey is like seeing how much the environment has changed and how many people are really like, you know, taking that ownership and claim of their identity and culture. So,
sure.
yeah.
Yeah, I do want to add, you know, you're Chinese. You came from a tech background. You transitioned from that tech background into, you know, your restaurant, Baoism, and then you know, proceeded on to create your own underground supper club. Minus the restaurant part, that sounds awfully familiar. And it's this guy right here. You know, you guys are self-made chefs. So I consider cooking and sharing food like almost like a alternate love language. And just hearing you guys speak about food, like about how you can show Los Angeles, like, hey, I can do Canto in a different way. And how you can show like the world or the United States, like, hey, like I can show you what Sichuan and Chengdu is about. Like, that's really special just because there's that passionate love for it. And there's no other reason. You guys just, that's why. And so, yeah, I think that's super great. And I love to hear that story from both you guys, because it's almost like a mirror image. If you guys go like this.
If you put me like 10 years later and with the success you've had, but
Yes.
I remember when you and I first met too, finally in person, because I think we had heard of each other, and finally at that event that we were at together you and I sat down for a little bit and talked a little, and it was like, oh wait, you're in tech. And then it felt like the whole Spider-Man meme. It's like, oh wait. But did you also left to go do cooking? And now you're doing CPG. Wow. Like I want to go into CPG and like, it's
What are you going to do? No. But
we'll get there.
speaking of that love language, I think Jasper is ready to show you the next course of love.
I think so.
Food.
Course of love.
Great
Course of
segue.
love. Yeah, this is perfect. Yeah, so I'm gonna go ahead and prepare our what we call the favorite dish. It's the main dish and an entree that we're serving currently at the Supper Club. This one's very heavily inspired by everything that you have brought to the table in terms of your sauces and your powders. It will take me a little bit, but I'll be right back.
Can't wait. Thank you.
Awesome, thanks. Now that we finally got settled, this is the main course or our favorite dish here. And at Rosalind, it's always usually the most decadent one that we do. This particular one is actually a dry aged New Zealand lamb that we dry age in-house for 7 days to bring out the flavor, a little bit of kombu wrap to finish it off as well. The bottom is a mint and micro cilantro salad with just a little bit of olive oil, because the reason of the shine though, and all the extra flavor and the aromatics that are in the air, and I wish everyone could actually smell this, we're using 2 of your specific items that you provide. One of them is the Zhong sauce. We actually burn the Zhong sauce with burnt garlic and chilies ourselves using your tribute chilies. We extract extra chili oil onto it, put it on there so it's a little smokier. And then we have your mala spice that this is actually aged in. So there's layers of that pepper that's sitting in there, and that's why you're getting that beautiful char. I know we did lamb before, but like I really wanted to showcase something that's very Northern Chinese. I remember when I visited like Shanghai and Sichuan for a little bit back in the day, one of my favorite things to eat was like cumin lamb.
Yeah.
But this is kind of like using your sauces and bringing out those flavors. So please enjoy.
Can't wait.
Let's do it.
Hopefully I did the flavors right.
Oh, you're just going all in, huh?
Oh, wow. This is amazing. Wow. I've never seen like Zhong and mala used together like this. This is great.
Out of all the success you've had, looking back on your whole journey, tell me about that time that was so profound where you just like fucking failed and that you just remember and that will always stay with you.
Well, where do I start? There's so many. The whole journey is always filled with ups and downs, sometimes in the same day, right? Like it's really not for the faint of heart. Any entrepreneur will tell you this. Like you really have to really want what you're doing, because there's many opportunities to quit. The first time I really knew failure was when my business partnership with my first restaurant, Baoism, failed. You know, we were doing very, very well, and we were getting tons of accolades and press attention. And my business partner was this like young Shanghainese kid whose family had a lot of money. And I was like, in my naive, 25-year-old, self without any experience going into a business partnership, I was like, well, that's great. He's got money. I've got the idea, and like, let's do this, right? And I ended up doing the majority of, the work, because it was my idea. Also, we had different concept of what, the value of time and money was to us. And what ended up happening was, when we got a lot of media attention, a lot of it was on me. And basically, I think egos got to the best of my partner, and he made the decision that he didn't need me in the business anymore. So I was pushed out of this business that I built myself.
Wow. You were the chef, though.
No, it was fast casual. So we
see.
standardized recipes, and it was like
Got it.
anyone could replicate it. So a very tough lesson in like, how to pick the right business partner. I think anyone who's an entrepreneur and who has had multiple businesses have probably had a failed partnership in some way or form, right? And so at the time, it was devastating, because I poured myself into this business. I hadn't paid myself for like 2 or 3 years. Meanwhile, this person had, their parents funding their entire lifestyle, and there's no difference to them. Whereas, I had felt like I lost everything. I bounced back very quickly. From the outside looking in, I immediately packed up and went to Chengdu and started studying with this chef and started figuring out what Fly by Jing was. And I knew I had this like inner confidence that, I had done the majority of the work up until that point. So I had gotten that experience under my belt. Yeah. And I knew that if I did a next thing, I would be able to do it better. So while I had that confidence, I also had lost some confidence in like my judgment, my ability to like pick the right business partner, my ability, to choose, who to trust. Yeah. And I think it took me many years to kind of recover from that.
Yeah.
And
damn, so we don't like this guy.
Right? No. He's never welcome on the show.
No.
We don't like you.
Not even to the supper club.
I'm just kidding.
So it was like many years until, I was able to, now I'm opening up SWA in Larchmont, and I have a business partner who I really respect, and we work together so well. But it took me many years to get to that point where I felt comfortable, letting someone else in. Where Fly by Jing, I almost like went too far the opposite direction, where I was like, okay, I'm going to call this company Fly by Jing so people know whose it is. Yeah. And also I'm going to exert all control. And, and I think I held too much control too tightly. And that not only limited our growth, it also limited, my bandwidth and my physical ability to like, really run this business. So really ran myself down to the bone building this. So a lot of lessons like throughout. Sure. But that was probably like the biggest like,
Memorable
thing that
one.
I think really set the scene for what I was going to do. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, having a restaurant is a big deal, and it's your baby. I mean, I don't know. I mean, Rosin is essentially kind of like a similar thing.
Almost
as your
there.
Baby.
We're getting there, yeah.
But having to give that up, I mean, that's probably going to be in your memories forever, And so like, that sounds tough. It sounds really tough.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm also just so fascinated by, I'm trying to just kind of dive deep, because I like to kind of see both sides. Like, what would go on in his mind, knowing that you're the face, knowing that you had the publicity, you were talking about press really just surrounding all around you, and what catapulted you up for him to be like, you know what? No, this is my business. Because that seems very short-sighted.
Yeah.
Right? Like you're literally like saying Gordon Ramsay, you can't have your restaurant.
He was younger than me. So I was 25. He was probably 23,
Oh my goodness.
So I think like ego, I think just like immaturity, I think hubris, everything. A lot of people go into restaurants out of ego, right? Like people just want their names on a restaurant. Like they want to say, I own a restaurant, So I think the motivations were maybe not.
I've heard that so much.
Yeah, but the motivations were probably skewed on that one. And I was just too naive to kind of see. To me, it was like, oh, simple. Like, I have an idea. He's got money. Like that. Let's go. I learned a lot of lessons like throughout my life in terms of like, how do I, accept help from others and not feel like I have to do everything on my own, right? I didn't have to like take it all on myself, and if I accepted that help or that, contribution from this person, I might have like looked at the partnership differently. Like, this is maybe not the right partnership if you're not willing to put that in, right? It's a lot of lessons learned from every front. Yeah.
If we can focus on just when Fly by Jing, the brand came to existence, can you recall a time when it was just so heavy that, you just want to maybe not actually quit, but those thoughts kind of dug in?
Constantly in the beginning, like, especially when I was doing it by myself, and especially when I was doing the supper club, because, I'm like, cooking is hard, right? Especially when, I didn't have the confidence of like, I've worked 10 years in the kitchen, this and that. And I was just like trying to do stuff and standing up late nights, like, alone in the kitchen, just like prepping or whatever, and just being like, what am I doing with my life?
Yeah.
That
sounds so familiar.
like my whole body aches, and I'm just like standing there at midnight, and there was a lot of moments then where, it felt, it's a very lonely journey as well, and it didn't have to be, I really made it that way. But to back up a little bit, when I was doing the pop-ups, I didn't know that I was going to become a sauce company. It was not the plan. It was just like, let me just see where this goes. And the events was like, I was doing events. I was also doing consulting on the side, and I had told some friends like, oh, I think I want to maybe like explore making a sauce and like maybe bring it to the US. And after many months, they saw like that I hadn't really taken action towards it. And they were just, I had one friend who really called me out, and she was like, what are you doing? Like, you're still doing all these consulting projects for what? Like, for security, for money? Yeah, okay. But I've heard you say this thing that you're just not following through on. So I realized at that point that I was kind of maybe delaying what I really wanted to do because of fear. And it took me kind of a really long time and a lot of like work on myself. I think entrepreneurship is often like work on yourself as well, right? Like, you can't be an entrepreneur and go through everything and the trials and tribulations that come with being an entrepreneur without working on yourself and facing some of your internal blocks.
Yeah.
And, belief systems and changing those things.
You come out different.
You come out different. And so it takes, a lot of courage. It takes a lot of like courage to examine yourself and like, what is there? What's actually there that's preventing you from taking those steps? And like for me at the time, it was like self-therapy. I was like reading all these books about like literally self-help books. I was reading Tony Robbins because I was like, how come all these white men have so much confidence? Like, how come they walk in a room and they just command, attention, and they demand people to, give them funding for whatever they do? Like, where does that come from? So I really like study like a science. I was like, I need to read everything that Tony Robbins writes.
Right.
And did some of his exercises, and like, they worked, it worked over a long period of time, but I was like really intent on trying to shift my perspective of like leave behind who I thought I was and try to be someone that would start a business, someone that would venture out.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Wow.
Man, it's like constant evolution. I think that is like nonstop. And I'm sure you're seeing this now, even though in our eyes, you've hit critical success, right? But feel for you, like this evolution continues on to develop new products, or even as you go into different markets, and now with your cookbook as well, right? Like doing so many things. And
yeah, the journey never ends. Like, and every phase of the business demands like a different version of you as an entrepreneur. So it's constant evolution for the business, for you as a leader, for everybody that works for you. It's very dynamic.
it's a test of personalities for sure, especially dealing with this guy and Heidi Lesso.
Speaking of personalities and evolution, you mentioned it before, but can you speak to us about the relationship of Fly by Jing, what that represents, right? Like whatever that represents to you, and the purging of the alias of Jenny.
So what I was saying earlier about like kind of you grow with the company, that's exactly kind of what happened with me. I started the company in a pursuit of like finding my identity, and the company has evolved a lot over the last 5 years, and so have I. And I found it really interesting how they've kind of grown in tandem, maybe not at the same pace or in the same direction sometimes, but like to me, it was my identity was so intertwined with this business. You know, it was an extension of me, which, you know, is kind of how it started, but actually it's no longer necessarily the case today because, you know, I also realized that there's a healthier way to approach, you know, your relationship with your business as well, that it doesn't need to be literally an extension of you. For me, I think the biggest point of growth was during pandemic when we were going through the biggest growth spurt at the company. You know, I mentioned earlier there was so much resistance and so much pushback and challenges to us existing. And I felt like I was constantly like justifying our right to exist, the company's right to exist, to like investors who told me there's no place for this. Chinese food is niche, it'll never take off. Even our detractors online saying like, you know, this is not Chinese food, like basically feeling like, you know, my existence or this company is not valid. And it was during COVID that I realized, after several weeks of being locked in indoors and not having to face the outside world for a really extended period of time, that I realized there was like a shift in kind of how I felt, like just physically. My nervous system was relaxed. I was like, why do I feel different? Why do I feel just like myself, you know? And I just realized it was because I haven't had to go out and, you know, fight for this right to exist for this period of time, which I had become so accustomed to my entire life. And that I was actually okay. Like, I did not need to justify that to anybody, and I did not need to live up to anyone else's expectations. And that was sort of the moment where it was kind of a light bulb that was like, actually, you can reclaim your identity. And, you know, to me, the first step towards that was reclaiming my birth name, Jing. So kind of overnight, I was like, all of a sudden, you know, okay with Jing. I realized I had this trauma attached to like the name, and, you know, I was hiding behind Jenny all my life. But overnight, that kind of disappeared for me. And I was like, oh, I think I'm Jing now.
Yeah.
So
Busted
that was,
out of the cocoon.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was kind of the first step, you know, and it's not like the name change kind of changed everything and all of a sudden I reclaimed my power, but it was the first step, and, you know, it's a work in progress, and it probably will happen the rest of my life.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. No, it was just so aligned that it was just kind of like just a really interesting story to kind of hear about, you know, from beginning to end. And now you go by Jing. And then honestly, there's some articles that I see that you go by Jenny Gao.
Oh, because they were from before
older.
2020.
Yeah, they're older. And that's just so interesting to see, you know, and I love that because it's self-empowering.
Yeah.
So, you know, kudos to you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, Jenny brought me here, you know, like Jenny did her work, and but now we're ready.
She'll be on Jenny on the block. You know, it's fine. Thank God it's not called Fly by Jenny.
Yeah,
I
right.
think that it would be a little different, but
Yeah.
Yeah. Started in LA, and then you slowly creep towards like the Midwest, where they're not familiar with this, or they didn't even know it existed, you know, like, hey, I'm here and you're representing us in a good way, because like whether it's through flavor, whether it's through the label and PR, things like that. Essentially, you're the Shang-Chi of chili.
Wow.
If I will say, you know, but you are doing a thing, and it's appreciated because it's just inspiring other people that want to do the same. You know?
Well, thank you. I think it's definitely been really, again, not planned. I just was trying to, you know.
Shang-Chi didn't want the 10 rings. I'm just saying. He didn't, did he?
no.
Yeah.
No, okay, fair. That's a good parallel.
Right, right. You know, it wasn't until like I did the thing, which was like launch this product, that I started seeing, and I was actually surprised to see the reaction from folks, because more and more people were approaching me saying, like, I remember even Sandro from Sanzo, you know, now you see Sanzo everywhere. Yeah. But, you know, he reached out before he launched, and we grabbed coffee, and he was like, I was inspired by your Kickstarter, like, just wanted to meet. And like, we've remained good friends and supported each other since. And same with many other founders. It's been really exciting to be a part of this. Like, it almost feels like a close-knit group, because we're all fighting against the same challenges. We're all trying to move towards the same goals. And when we all when one succeeds, we all succeed, right? So we want to make sure everybody succeeds because the stakes are high, right? It's like a film, right? Like, it's unfair, but like when a new Asian film comes out, we all have to go support it because it can't fail, right? So it's kind of like that. So we support each other, and so it's been really cool to see the landscape shift and change. And so what I'm more proud of is not like seeing us in like 5,000 stores, but like is seeing so many other brands like us all come into the global aisle of a grocery store. And now it's no longer this stale aisle. It's a destination aisle that people actually go to specifically to look for brands like ours. So yeah, it's been really cool.
I love that you bring that point up too, because I remember even just when the pandemic started, their chili oil, even at the Whole Foods in downtown, was shifted in a specific section. And now it's actually in the more general spices area next to your McCormick's and everything else. And you kind of go, wait a second, there's actually a cultural shift that's happening, and you're really just making that happen by putting your product out there. So it's incredible. Like, access is huge.
Yeah.
I wonder what percentage of that you had to do with,
What percentage?
like that shift of the aisles in the grocery
Of
store.
course. Jing, I saw Jing at Whole Foods knocking over McCormick's.
Yeah, I personally go to every single store. And then,
That's a lot of work. You need to hire a henchman for that. But the book of Sichuan chili crisp. Congratulations.
Thank
on
you.
your cookbook.
Yeah, so it's my first cookbook, and it launched last week.
Yes.
Everywhere books are sold. And
You're doing a book tour, right?
I'm in the middle of the book tour right now.
And then, can I remind you, you launched 2018. Like, think about that. And so, tell me what that means to you to be able to execute that and the event, and
It feels like no time has passed, and it also feels like forever, because that's just, time is very relative, like when you're running a business. But yeah, I've really been excited since the beginning to write a cookbook, and always had a dream to do that. But it took a while, and it was never a good time. In fact, when I did it, it wasn't a good time. But I kind of just I don't know what happened, but just kind of turbo just made my way through the process. It only took 6 months, and it normally takes a lot longer. Yeah. But the cookbook is out. It's called The Book of Sichuan Chili Crisp. And actually, the reason why it took very long was because originally I'd always wanted to do a book that reflected the fly restaurants of Chengdu, But when this opportunity came to write this book, it was during COVID, and we couldn't travel to China. So it was kind of so what can I do that I can do from here? And also, that worked with what I was doing at Fly by Jing, and really, basically amplified both. So the book is about chili crisp, but it's also a very personal story about my journey of starting this business, where I started to where we are now. And also, the 85 recipes in there are not just chili.
85? Wow.
Yeah.
Amazing. That's amazing.
It's not just chili
in 6
crisp.
months? Can someone do the math? How many recipes is that per week?
Yeah, who's the
That's
good
amazing.
Well, a lot of the recipes are rooted in the dishes that I used to make at the supper club. So,
okay.
I had that foundation.
Right.
So it was not as difficult as starting from scratch. But yeah, so it was really just to showcase the versatile Sichuan flavors. And also, I used to call what I did Sichuan soul food. It's very soulful. It's comforting. It's very homey, So it's supposed to be approachable. So that's kind of the way that the book is. It's very easy, accessible, approachable, ways to incorporate Sichuan flavors into your everyday. And, you can really do stuff from scratch if you wanted to, or you can take a shortcut and use Fly by Jing ingredients. So it gives you the options.
It's amazing.
I'm kind of curious because I haven't had a chance to look at the copy of the book. I'm really excited about it though. Does every recipe have a Fly by Jing option in there?
I think so. Whether it's a chili oil or a mala spice, or even an Argentine chili or a tribute pepper or like a tribute pepper oil or something. There is, I think, in every recipe. Yeah.
Genius
There's also a
marketing play.
dessert. There's also a dessert section and a cocktail section. So
Yes.
it really shows the the breadth of the flavors.
Yes.
100%. I mean, we were playing with a lot of these flavors back in Series 6 when we were doing that of almost a year ago when we were doing Cantonese and Sichuan flavors combined. And actually, I think that's a perfect segue. But this next course will have something like that in
Great.
that sense. But remember when you were playing around with the Sichuan green chili oil that looked like the cologne bottle?
Yes.
We're putting it into cocktails.
Put it in cocktails.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
fantastic.
that's like one of my favorite products that we make, which unfortunately is being discontinued soon.
Oh,
Yeah, I know. We're just being very disciplined in like our SKU assortment and like, as much as that product is beautiful, I love it. And I'm hoarding it, but it's not one of our top, and so it just operationally it doesn't make sense. But anyway, it's one of the best products, I think. And it's so bright, citrusy, it's like, yeah, it's very different.
You could probably find it on the black market in about 6 months, so be on the
Right.
lookout. Yeah, just to kind of finish up, what's one piece of advice, one specific piece of advice that you hold dear to you, that you are able, because I know it's like, you work this hard, but you're able to kind of share with all the listeners out there?
Just broadly, I would say, this is going to be, borrowing what Steve Jobs said one time, where he said, like, looking back, the dots connect, right? The through line of your life makes sense. But when you're in it, it's rarely obvious where you're headed. And I think that's very true. It may look like, oh, in such a short period of time, like, I built this thing. But like I keep saying, it was never planned. I never had this master plan.
Yeah.
I took steps at a time, and each step revealed the path ahead, right? If I didn't take that step, I wouldn't have known where to go next.
Right.
So for me, I think sometimes people like have a hard time getting started, and I definitely had the same challenges. But I think it's really just like doing and letting your intuition kind of tell you and take you to the next step. And from there, the path is more obvious, of where you can go. So and just trusting that eventually you'll get to a point where looking back, it all makes sense. So trusting that journey, trusting that your intuition is guiding you in the right place.
Got it. Thank you.
I love that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Really just trusting your gut and believing in yourself. I think that's a huge
Believing
thing.
in yourself.
That's the hardest part.
And yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Well, should we final course from
I think so.
Chef Jasper?
Yeah. Yes. We're on the last part. On your final note, we go into the final bite, which is the last dish that we do at Roslyn. It's always the most decadent, the most exciting. And I'm very excited to prepare this for you because it really combines everything that you've done in terms of your flavors and what I love in Cantonese cuisine. So I'll be right back. So we were talking about the final bite, and this is, I think, the epitome of everything that we do here at Roslyn, and also something that has evolved since we first met. Is one of the first dishes I think I served you was actually a version of this, which is our cilantro, roasted scallion, Sichuan peppercorn, chili oil chimichurri. This version has your Sichuan chili crisp in it, and that's what we've been using in most of our newest renditions. But the fun thing I wanted to share about you is we were talking about CPG, right? And for our viewers, consumer packaged goods, right? Is this is actually the CPG version of it with your Sichuan chili crisp on top. It's added in with fresh micro cilantro. You have a stunning Hokkaido scallop that's on top, so that's different from what you had with us before. And then on the side, because it's extra decadent, we have Santa Barbara spot prawns that are lightly fired with a little bit of smoked ocean trout roe that we use mesquite to smoke. So you got all those different layers and flavors on there to really bring this together. But it's our final bite, and our thank you for being on the show.
Beautiful. Thank you. And when you say it's a CPG product, like, are you bottling this chimichurri, or what do you mean?
We plan to, and
Yeah.
I'll need some advice, but this is actually a shelf-stable one that can hold up to 4 months.
Oh, wow.
And
That's
so
amazing.
we've had some advice, in terms
Great.
of how to do this, but
Yeah.
wanted to get your input too. So
Oh, my goodness. Yeah.
let's try this.
Great.
Oh man.
Thank you. So excited. What's in the chimichurri?
We have cilantro, roasted scallions, Sichuan peppercorns, the green ones. We have pickled garlic, and then
wow.
Sichuan chili crisp in there to add additional oil on top.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I love
It's
it.
really nice. But Jing, you are killing
this
it
off.
with
The food.
the CPGs. Oh, the food too.
Yeah, I'm killing it. I'm killing all the
Thank
plates.
you.
The food too. Yeah, you killed it.
We'll make you another portion after.
Thank you.
Congratulations on the upcoming SWA at the marketplace, because that's going to be super cool. I think it's very much needed. Before we ending comments, can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah.
Or?
So Swa is a modern Sichuan, convenient, healthy grab and go. So it is, again, I'm really into these like really efficient models of like fast casual, or Swa was actually, inspired by, I've always really admired the pret-a-manger model. If you're familiar with pret-a-manger, it's like from the UK, but it's all over the world. It's grab and go sandwiches, salads.
Oh my God, when you said that, I was thinking pret-a-manager, because they have that in Hong Kong.
Oh, yeah,
But
yeah.
it's- yeah, pret-a-manger. There we go.
Pret-a-manger, yeah. I mean, it has a very bougie name for like a very simple concept,
Yeah.
right? Which you just go in and there's rows of fridges, and then you just grab your lunch, and it's breakfast, lunch, dinner, but it's like really fresh sandwiches, salads, sides, and then there's a coffee bar. So the food is mostly prepared offsite and then brought in, but it's brought in fresh daily. So you're just getting like a very reliable, convenient, quick option to eat. But the flavor is not great, right? Like it's just simple sandwiches and whatever.
Sure.
So imagine that model, but combined with actual good flavors and like Sichuan flavors. So that's been my dream. And so I'm really fortunate to have found my business partners. So Stephanie her family, she's from Chongqing, so like also from Sichuan region. And her family has operated Sichuan restaurants in LA for many years. So they have that like expertise and know-how, together with like my sort of creative input and like the inspiration, of bringing the pret-a-manger model with also ingredients that we source from Sichuan, and, ingredients and sauces that can really make scaling up the concept much easier because it's already standardized, right? And then also with our third partner, who is a group called Organic Oren, who are incredible at like making these gorgeous California organic farmers market fresh, meal prep delivery service. They operate this in LA. And both me and Steph were customers, and we really loved their approach to ingredients and flavor. And we felt like there was some, synchronicity there. And we wanted to marry, both me and Steph, like we're living in LA, but we're from Sichuan. And we wanted, again, like this concept to fit into our lives today, but rooted in tradition. So sounds very familiar, like sounds very similar to Fly by Jing, right? Like it was, rooted in tradition, but made for the way we eat today. And so I saw like this parallel and the ability to just like, find the efficiencies in something that I'm already making, and something that doesn't exist that we want to create. So it kind of was great. So that's the concept, and it's in the middle of Larchmont, which is walking area community, one of the few family and like community driven areas in LA. And it really just doesn't have any Asian food. Especially not Sichuan food. It's pretty close to K-Town, but like other than that, there's no access to Sichuan flavors. And then in addition, we wanted to also have a retail area that showcased like Asian made, home goods and pantry items.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, Jing, you do so much for your community. You're killing it. Have fun on the rest of your book tour.
Thank you.
Congrats and good luck on the opening of SWA. I can't wait to check it out. We should team meeting.
Yeah, we'll have a team meeting as
team
well.
meeting.
Yeah.
We'll go
And,
get the cold down noodles or
Yes.
sesame noodles.
And most of all, thank you for sharing with our viewers, listeners, of your story. It means a lot to have someone like you in the community and showcase what you've done, what you're capable of, anyone. But with that said, I think it wraps it up. My name is David.
And I'm Jasper.
And Heidi says farewell.
Goodbye.
And this has been another episode of the Durian Pod. Until next time, guys.
See you soon.
If you enjoy the episode, like, comment, and subscribe. And you can find more episodes of the Durian Pod where you can listen to other podcasts.